Hello! Well, welcome to this new development stream of ScourgeBringer. So make yourself at home. I'm about to start, just going to tweak a couple of things, but I'm basically okay. So checking out the chat. So hello Saket, hello Alpha U, hello Ergo Dolly Chef. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly, but okay. Hey Fang, how are you? So let's get started. Last week I've talked to you about a new tool that you have been making within our homemade editor for ScourgeBringer. It was the boss animation. So last week I explained you why we started to make our own animation tool. It was basically motivated because I thought that taking an existing solution, an existing 2D animation tool, and plug it with our own engine and our own pipeline and so on was maybe too complicated and maybe too bloated with a lot of stuff that we don't need, and that maybe doing an animation editor would be faster for me and more efficient, because we would be able to have a live preview of what we are going to do within our own engine and be able to plug other kind of stuff like our weapon system to have directly access to weapon and our bullet system within our animation directly, and also any kind of sound event and so on. So right now the game has no sound at all, but we are planning to use Fmod for this, and it would be super cool if we would be able to plug Fmod events directly into this tool. And that's why I started to make this, and at first it was kind of a personal challenge to know if I would be able to do this kind of tool, and I was expecting this to take me a long time. I was expecting this to be several weeks, maybe a month or 2 months of work, and that's why I never really tried to tackle this problem. That's also why we didn't do that on Neurovoider, and we done something else with the animation. But for ScourgeBringer, I really wanted to try this because you want to push things forward and you want to do things right about the animation and about boss patterns and so on. So we really needed a tool for that. So I started about a week ago to implement such a tool, and it turned out pretty well. Things I believe would take me several weeks took me maybe days or a couple hours. So that was very, very cool. I underestimated myself a lot on this program, and I'm very, very glad that things turned out pretty well. So this is our animation tool. So this is a boss preview, and right now I have one single animation that is made, which is the idle animation. So we have an autoplay feature, so the animation can play by itself, and I can also manipulate the timeline with my mouse. And basically you have all the different parts of the boss. So you have a body, you have a head, you have left arm and right arm. So all of this is defined in a text-based file because we don't want to bother having the definition of the different part to be within our editor. It would be too much of a hassle, and a text file is usually more than enough to define this. So what we do is that we have a text file where we define all the parts of a boss and where are the different parts in the texture, how we cut things out, and how we plug everything together, and how the arms are positioned compared to the body, to the head, and so on. And when we launch the editor, we have this view. So this is the boss that have been composed in this text file. And then I can animate the parts one by one independently and over a timeline. So each column of this timeline is one frame of our animation. We have animation based on 100 milliseconds per virtual frames, even if in games things are going to be interpolated. Animations won't be at 10 frames per second. It's going to be 60 frames per second, but everything is going to be smoothed and in between frames. And that's the purpose of this tool. You can define keyframes. So here I have keyframes at the 10th frame and keyframes at the 20th frame. And I just defined positions. So this is the frame number 1. So it's the initial position. And at the frame number 10, I want, for example, that my head is positioned at -2 pixels compared to the first frame. So for instance, if I take the head and I grab it here, so I see it's going now to be -16, and at frame number 0, it's 0. And what the tool and what the animation engine is doing automatically is that it's going to interpolate every coordinate that I'm going to use. So now that I have changed the position of my head on the 10th frame, if I launch the animation, it's going to blend and to ease all the positions and do an animation out of it. So that's the basic idea. So hello Arkham, hello Dark Wolfie, how are you guys? And with this kind of tool, you can do basically any kind of animation. So right now, the tool only supports translations. As you see here in the timeline, I have also planned rotations. I almost have all the code for the rotation that is in, but I'm not going to try to toy with it yet because I think it's highly unstable. Doing rotations when you have bone-based animation is kind of tricky, because it's like I have my arm, and let's say that I would have one sprite to define this part of the arm and one sprite to define this. So I have two different sprites, and just noticing that you don't quite see my arm like I'm explaining. So let's say that I have one sprite per part, per articulated part. So I would have one part for this bone and one part for this bone. So this would be two different sprites. And if I want to rotate this bone based on this joint, so I have one rotation here. But if I want to move the whole arm, I'm going to use this joint to move like this. But that seems pretty simple, but the problem is that if I move this part of my arm, this joint is going to move, and there is also an implicit rotation that is being made, because if there were no rotation, the movement would be something like this. And I don't want rotation to be handled like this. I want to be that everything is automatic, and like, I mean, that every rotation compared to the parent's bone and joints are going to be automatically processed. And that's kind of a tricky problem to solve, because you really have to be careful about everything. And the other problem is that once you have rotated something, if you want on my animation panel, let's say here that I want to take the head and I want to move it around, here it's pretty simple because there is absolutely no rotation applied. But if there was something like a rotation at 45 degrees, my head would be like so. But if I take my sprites and start to grabbing from left to right, I want the rotation to be preserved. And the problem is that the translation should be also realigned to be perpendicular to the currently applied rotation So there are values that I need to invert the rotation so that, well, I hope that you get the picture, but when there is rotation that start to be involved, it's going to be kind of tricky. Another cool thing with this editor is that it's trying to blend missing frames. Here, for instance, I have only a frame here on my root node. My root node allows me to move the whole bus at once. And if you look here, I don't have any keyframe here for the head translations. It only goes from the first frame to the 10th frames, but the whole animations goes up to the 20th frame. So there is a dashed line that appear, and that means that even if there is a missing frame, the animation system is going to try to finish the animation by blending the translation toward what would be the value of the first frame. So it tries to loop animation, and that's why here it's able to loop. But for instance, if I just remove my keyframe here on the 20th, all the virtual blending is going to disappear, and my animation is just going to go to the 10th frame, and it's not going to blend. It's going to jump back to the original position, and there is going to be a jump in the animation. So here you see. So there's no blending back to the first frame, and if you want to do that, you have to add somewhere a keyframe like here, and it's going to blend back to the original position. Okay, and if I want to do more fancy animation, I can use other kind of blending. So in game making or in animation or anything that is 2D, you have something that is called easing. It's basically how you interpolate two positions over a time over time. And I'm going to show you there is just a website that is super cool and very handy for this. It is called easings.net, and it's basically an interactive website that shows you all the different kind of easing that you can implement and how they behave. So these are curves, and if you take a look at the little red cursor, it's going to show you how the easing is going over time. So like here, so the ease out elastic. So you see that at the end of the movement, there is some bouncing. And I have all of these implemented here in ScourgeBringer. So if I want this blending to be an ease out, an elastic out, just have to go to the easing. So right now it's a linear easing, and I go to the elastic and I want to be out. So right now, if I just play this, so it's not quite visible, I'm going to try to exaggerate the movement by making my boss over here. And when the boss is going back to its initial position, you see that the easing is not going to be linear. It's going to be blended through the curve that I have defined and implemented, and that is going to be the so it's going to be this one, the ease out elastic. And I can define all kind of different kind of blending. Other stuff that are maybe fun to see is the elastic in out. So maybe not in out, maybe just out. Just out. So the elastic out is an animation that is cool because it makes you feel that something is bouncing on the ground. So it just have an hit and you feel that there is something like an impact on the animation. And this can be quite cool to do some cool stuff. I'm going to try a new animation. And on this new animation, I'm going to try to do a punch on the wall, for example. So I can add a new keyframe here for the animation. No, that's the head. No, I want, for instance, my left arm. So the left arm, I'm going to add 2 keyframes and a third one to go back to the initial position. This one, I'm going to remove it. And so on the 10th frame, I want my left arm to be something like here on the wall. And here I want it to come back. So here I have only linear interpolation, so it's going to be quite, well, bland. So that's not the kind of animation that we want. We want to have something more punchy. And so here what we are going to do is this blending, we are going to use the so-called bounce out. And here you are going to see that the animation is going to go very fast at first and bounce back on the wall. So here you go. So this is pretty simple. It's not quite very satisfying yet, but you get the picture. With all this kind of tool, we can start to set up some cool animation and so on. And I also would like to push things forward, because right now for the movement I only handle simple translation from one point to another. It's just one line, and I want this to be more complex, like following a path, and you can define paths with splines. So I don't know if you know what splines are, but if I just go here, so a spline is basically a list of points that are defined, and each point have weight toward a direction, and that forms a curve. And it's not that difficult to pull together, but it's going to be a bit tricky because I will have to have a line editor here, and it's maybe going to be a bit complex to pull together, because the part where you see the boss, it's a live preview from within our engine, and it gets a bit tricky if you want to do paths, because our virtual resolution for ScourgeBringer is pretty small, so visualizing paths with precision is maybe going to be a bit difficult, but I'm going to try. I want to give this a try. So let's see if you have any questions in the chat. Yeah. Sorry, back. Have you answered my question? When I was, what was the question? So when you have finished an animation for a monster, how will it be stored for the game? It's going to be stored in a custom binary format. What we do is that all our files from within our editor are text-based. You can see text like this. It's a JSON file. And you can, I believe that if you just try to understand a bit what's going on, you can maybe see what all of this represents. We have the same thing for the enemy. The enemy, all the parameters are defined here in a text file. But when I want to export them to the game, these are going to be in a custom format that we have since Neurovoider. We created our own custom format for assets and for data, and it's a format that is binary, compressed, and some files are also encrypted, but not all, because we don't believe that encryption is anything useful. But some are, because we don't want some file to be edited if they are sensitive to multiplayer, for instance. So in Neurovoider, we have anything that is related to the daily run is encrypted to avoid anybody to tweak values and maybe cheat on the leaderboard and so on. But for the base game, we really don't care about people toying around with the values. And why it is in a binary compressed format, it's because text formats are very, very heavy to process. And it takes a lot of time to parse a text file. It takes a lot of resource, it takes a lot of memory, and it can generate a lot of garbage. And if you have garbage in your game, you're most going to have hiccups during play. And I want to avoid all of this. And to give you an example, in Neurovoider, at first, all the levels were stored in text file and mostly XML files. And each tile for one of the environment of Neurovoider was about 1 megabyte, maybe more. And so if you take all the about 10 environments that we had, you add a text file that was more than 10 megabytes just for defining the tiles and the maps. So it was quite a lot. It can seem small because games today are several gigabytes. But for us, it was quite heavy. And loading those files was taking several seconds. And if you played Neurovoider, you see that the loadings and the generation of the map are very, very fast. That's because we switched back to a binary format. We didn't change anything to the generation algorithm and so on. We just switched to a binary format that is compressed. And loading this kind of file is basically very, very efficient. It takes a few milliseconds. And they are very small, very, very small. I don't know if I have Neurovoider installed here, but even for ScourgeBringer, we have already some files like this one. So this file, all the boss catalogs, the bullet catalogs, emitters, enemy, maps, particle, room, all of these are going to be the data of the game. Everything will be here. And as you see right now here in the prototype, there are about 5 kilobytes. So if this was XML files, it would already be multiple megabytes. So I have created all these binary format and automatic serializations and deserialization of this format for Neurovoider. So it's pretty fast and pretty efficient for me to work like this. And I'm pretty satisfied. This allowed us to downsize the game a lot. And downsizing a game can be very interesting because things like ratings, everything that is PEGI, ESRB, and so on, are sometimes related to the installation space of the game. The more space it takes, the more expensive will be the rating. And with Neurovoider, we managed to be under the smallest possible category. So like a PEGI, for instance, a PEGI rating is costing us something like 10 times less than a big game. So that's pretty cool for us because over engineering stuff maybe, but trying to downsize everything helps us to reduce our cost when we publish the game. And that's very important at our scale of company to do things like this. So how small? So I think you were talking about the data files. Then the result of the editor will be JSON or will be used by the game. No, there will be absolutely no human readable file within the game, except the configuration file, the one that you can tweak your resolution, sound volume, and so on. This file, we keep it human readable because we want people to be able to troubleshoot problems if there are any problems. On the first version of Neurovoider, the configuration file was using our binary format, and it was kind of a problem because when people got run into crash because of resolution issues and so on, we couldn't help them to tweak the resolution. The only possible solution was to delete the file completely. And so we switched to a human readable format when you can easily edit the text in Notepad and so on, and just try to trick. It compressed megabytes into kilobytes, and that's very cool. That's because binary formats are very, very, very efficient. It just go down to numbers, and it's not going to be anything like text like this. You're not going. It's just going. For instance, if I want to serialize here my my enemy catalog, it's going to go through each values, but it's not going to write in the file any of the headers. For instance, it's not going to write that the next value is going to be the name, that the next value is going to sprite size. It's just going to write the value as is, like 32, 0, 0, 0.5. And the engines, when I'm parsing a file, knows automatically what are the data that are expected, in which order, and what are the types. So it just unpack everything, and it's also compressed. So for instance, this file is compressed, is gzip compressed. So if I just take my setzip software, I can do open, and there's a file in it. There's another file in it that is compressed. And if you look at the size, so for instance, our room catalog, it's still quite small, but it's 2 kilobytes compressed, and it's 17 kilobytes uncompressed. So there is a huge benefit from compressing files. And in Neurovoider, I believe that we maybe compressed hundreds of megabytes down to a few hundred of kilobytes, and that was really awesome. So that's about it for what I can show you for now about this animation. What I can still cover is what Florian has been doing over the week, and also on current boss design. So these are the current bosses that we are all working on. So as you see, like, this one is absolutely not finished. There is nothing, like, there are only the shapes that are done. There is no shading and so on. So this is totally work in progress. This one is starting to get somewhere. This one is almost animated. Florian has been trying to animate the flames on another tool that iSprite. He's trying to use a trick by using Adobe After Effects to take the sprite and apply a wave movement, and that's going to be able to enable him to generate some base frame for his flame animation, because flame are something very tedious to animate. And you only have to clean up the animation, and it's going to be able to do flame animation very quickly. So that's very, very neat trick. I wish I could show you, but I don't have any of the Adobe software on my computer. And this is one of the last boss he has been trying to design. It's not yet animated, but it's going to be quite a hell to animate because of all the tentacles and so on. And yeah, that's pretty much it for everything that he's been working on. Another thing, Florian has been off a bit lately because he was helping a friend who's making a game on his own, and Florian sometimes does a sprite for him. So it's a friend, he's called Cyril, and he's doing a little game on his spare time that is called Ragnar. And Ragnar is it's a platform game with oh, I'm sorry, there is a cat that's just destroyed the webcam. I'm going to try to just take back the webcam. And here it is. Silly cat. She just got afraid of her own. Yeah. No, there's nothing to see here. No, she went away. Well, and I can show you the cat, but where she is? She is. Here she is. She look very cool like this, but she does a lot of dirty tricks. But she's quite fine most of the time. So what about your question? If you have any question, don't hesitate. It's a library you've written, or is it standard in C#? So I think you are speaking about everything that is generating binary format. There is a lot of stuff in C# that are already done to serialize stuff in a whole lot of formats, but I have tweaked a bit of those things to be more efficient and close to our own need, to our own engine, to try to get a few more kilobytes of optimization. But really, that's clearly over engineering. So you considered protobuf. I know protobuf. I never used it. I know quite a bunch of game developers that are using protobuf. And what's cool about protobuf is that you can plug your data live with what's running on the screen, and you can tweak anything and change them back. And I know that the developers of Drifting Lens are using protobuf a lot for everything that is data, and it seems to be very, very efficient for us. I've never really looked into protobuf, but maybe one day. But for now, we have our own serializers, and it works quite fine for what we are trying to do. Okay, yeah, I was just talking about Ragnar. Ragnar, it's a small platform game where you are a dwarf and you explore some dark places, and you have candles, and you can throw candles to light your way. And it's quite an hard game. It's I mean, it's a lot of diet and try, but it's very cool, and there is a lot of stuff, and the developer Cyril is really likely to want to do things right and cool. And if you want to give him a little shout out or encouragement, feel free to check his itch.io page. I'm going to paste that into the chat if you want to take a look. So there are people and also Florian that are doing sprites for this game. So Florian did the sprites of Ragnar, the dwarf, and some sprites of the background and so on. And there are other pixel artists that are doing background for the game. Not sure if I'm allowed to name any names, but if you want to have any information, check out the page of Ragnar and go say hi to Cyril. He's a very cool guy, and if you want to talk to him directly, he's also on our Discord channel. So that's about it for the latest news on ScourgeBringer. So I've been working very hard on this tool. I'm going to still work hard for the next few days. Starting next week, I'm going to be working a little bit less on ScourgeBringer because I am about to start porting a game to the Switch. And that is not one of our games. It's a game that I am working for other people, and I'm helping them to port the game to the Nintendo Switch. So I'm going to start working on this game starting next week. I would like to show you how this is done, how I am working on the Switch dev kit, and what I am going to do with this game, how all the adaptation and what needs to be done when you actually port a game. I really want to be able to show you the game, but I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to. I'm going to ask the publisher of the game, because the game has not been announced yet on the Switch, so it's a bit tricky. I'm going to try to figure this out, and if I am allowed to show you all this stuff, there will be a little bit less of ScourgeBringer during my development stream and in the newsletter, but there are going to be other stuff that we are working on, and hopefully I'm going to be able to talk about these coming Switch games. So, catching up on questions, is it a kink to create your own engine while you could use a popular engine like anybody else, or it's for technical or design reason? And yeah, so the main reason that we are using our own technology, it's because I have something like 10 years of experience with this technology. And I know very well the tool, I know absolutely well how to do things, and I also already have some parts of what would be an engine. And it doesn't take much time to do things like putting together something like ScourgeBringer or NeuroVoider. And I'm very, very, very comfortable doing this. And it's not quite a kink. But it's more to choose the tool that is the best suited to you. Not the best suited necessarily to your game, but to you. I mean, I could be using Unity or anything else, but I am way more comfortable, efficient, and productive by using Monogame and making my own tools and engine than using Unity. Because I've rarely used Unity and I don't want to afford the time of learning a new tool, because I know that I'm going to be very, very efficient with this tool, and I know how to make it run on any consoles and any platform. So I am part of the development team of Monogame. I am one of the major contributors to the library, and I'm really investing time into this tool to make it better, and because I know it works very well. I know that if I would have to do NeuroVoider like I imagined it with Unity, it would have taken way more time, it would have been way bigger, and it would have maybe not run on PS Vita or maybe not on Nintendo Switch. While I know that I can master things with our own technology and how we goes. So it's not because I'm not trying to use the latest fancy technology that everybody uses. I'm just trying to use something that I know very well, that I know it's working everywhere, that I know I will be efficient with. So if your preferred language is like Python or Lua or anything, and you feel comfortable with it, and you hesitate to use the latest fancy stuff like Unreal Engine or Unity, just stick to what you know and what you know you would be comfortable with. So that's basically how we work, and we prefer to move forward than to think too much about technology. We don't want technology to be one of our problems. So on the next question, yeah, are you talking about Alain Puget? I mean, doing some side work so you can earn a living while making your own game. So Alain Puget is the boss of the studio that is called Alchemy, and they made the game that is Drifting Lands, which was talking a bit earlier. And they have a different concept at their company. They have a company and they do absolutely something else than video game. They do, I can be sure, but they do advertisements and other kind of stuff or project for other companies. And their objective is that if they start to do a game like they did for Drifting Lands, it's going to not be something that is critical to the company. I mean, they are allowed for the game to completely burn. And that's a very interesting strategy because it means that you don't have any pressure to make games. You can do the games that you would like to do, and you don't have any pressure if the game is going to fail or not. On the other hand, it means that you're not making a game really for a living. You're doing something else. But it's a very sane approach because making games and making games to work commercially is a very, very, very difficult and stressing task. So I can only abide to this kind of concept. Our situation is different. We are able, for now, to leave most of the game we are making. I mean, Neurovoider is allowing us to do ScourgeBringer. Most of the budget that we have on ScourgeBringer is based on what Neurovoider made, but making Neurovoider has been a very stressful experience, and we were very short on budget, and we don't want this to be a possibility anymore. So why we are doing some contract work beside our main productions is because we want to relieve the stress of having too tight budgets, and we want to be able to move forward even if we have any issues with the game. And that's very important because it allows us to sleep better at night. And trust me, it can be some very, very, very stressful issues if you have problems with your game budgets and anything that is related to running a company. So that was a bit unexpected to answer this kind of question at the end of this stream. But if you have any more questions, feel free to keep that coming. So Arkham have another important question. He's going to Lyon. Lyon is a city in France. From time to time, is it possible to offer me a beer at some point? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not quite often in Lyon, but if I'm anytime in Lyon, I'll be sure to hit you up, and I'll be completely glad to hang out a bit with you. And it's the same for anybody. If you are around, we are located in Metz. It's in the northeast of France, but we travel a lot to Paris, to Lyon, to Bordeaux, and also to other countries when there are events. In August, we will be in Germany, in Cologne, in Köln, in German, for the Gamescom. And yeah, if you want to drop by our studio or anything, feel free to hit me up. We are very, very glad to get people in to show our stuff around and so on. And of course, we'll be also very glad to meet you in person. So we are often the best spot usually is to catch us during the Stunfest in France, because we are usually very cool there, and there are a lot of people. And yeah, Terraria, you too, if you feel like, yeah. And well, so yeah, that's pretty much it. So and one day, if you want to meet around a pizza or a beer, I believe that we are both up to this, Florian and me, and that would be very cool. That's pretty much it, and I say pretty much it a lot, but that's a gimmick, man. So that's cool. So next few days working on Boss, and Florian is also continuing to work on Boss. Me, I'm going to try to figure out anything that is rotation within this editor. And maybe next week I'm going to show you how rotations work, and maybe even spline and passes for anything that is movement. So thank you again. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for your questions, and feel free to continue the discussion on our Discord channel, our Discord server, or on Twitter, or anywhere, or in the comment of the replay of this video. Feel free, and I will try to catch up and ask any question, or just drop by and share pictures of your pizza, and that would be very cool. So have a nice day, and see you next week, and also in the meantime in the newsletter. Bye.